The Isle of Man. It's a large island in the north of the Irish Sea, filled with oddities and loaded with ancient Celtic heritage. Their national symbol is the Triskelion, 3 legs attached together and supposedly a weapon used by ancient Celtic god Manannan, who gave the island its name. Peel Castle on the western coast is an ancient ruin that has been suggested by some to be the site of Avalon from Arthurian legend, where the legendary sword Excalibur was forged. And the Fairy Bridge, where it is considered to be bad luck if you do not wave to and greet the fairies that some believe to live on the island while crossing. Even some of its animals are oddities. This strange-looking breed of sheep, the Lochtan, is only farmed on this one island. And there is also the Manx cat, a breed famous for its distinctive lack of a tail. And though this is a perfectly ordinary rat, the islanders believe it bad luck to call them rats, most preferring to call them longtails instead. Even most of the chickens on the island are actually wild birds, and can be found wandering across roads throughout the island. But there is one other animal that is perhaps the strangest of all, not because it is rare, but because those who aren't already aware of their presence simply wouldn't expect to find them here. One phrase that I've heard quite often throughout my life is that Britain has no wildlife. This generally means it has nothing most people consider big and exciting. No elephants, no giraffes, no big cats, debatably, and no wolves or bears any longer. But you can never expect nature to follow rules and stick to boundaries, and on the Isle of Man is a great example of how nature can always take us by surprise. To begin unravelling the story of this particular animal's presence on the island, we have to start here, the Curras Wildlife Park in the northwest of the island.
It was opened in 1965, which is when the island was a major holiday destination for the people of the northwest of England, and hundreds of thousands came each summer. It had been agricultural land, but it had been abandoned because it was so wet you couldn't use mechanised farm implements on it, and one of the local politicians had the bright idea of making it some sort of nature preserve with a wildlife park attached for the holiday makers. And then in the late 80s we changed that round to focus on endangered species to join the modern zoo movement.
And also within the fences of this park are animals that live here both in captivity and in the wild. And here they are. They are red-necked wallabies.
They're a fairly standard item on any zoo or wildlife park's inventory. It's a little known fact outside the zoo world, but Australia is very jealous of its wildlife and has got very strict rules, and you're not allowed to export from Australia animals unless they are well represented in Australian zoos and they've got good captive breeding populations. So there's only a certain range of Australian animals you can get in Europe. Red-necked wallabies are one of those species, and the wildlife park got them right at the start. They're fairly agile animals. They will also crawl, which is one of the surprising things. So if there's a little hole at the bottom of the fence, they'll find it and crawl through it. And there was a newspaper article in 1965 that a wallaby had escaped, so they've been escaping for a long time. We don't know beyond that any particular details because it was all kept a bit quiet, really. It's a bit embarrassing when your animals go walk about. There were 2 in my time at the park, two escapes of numbers of wallabies because the fences were broken down. You get trees falling on them, or the water here is very acid and it will rust even galvanised fencing. But in those early years a population got established and has been breeding here for probably 30 or more years. So there's a reasonable number of them here now.
So, there you have it. There is a wild population of red-necked wallabies living in the area around the wildlife park, known as the beloved Kuras, and there has been for near on half a century. They can be found throughout the area, but a good place to see them is here, at the Close Startfield Nature Reserve. It's primarily a wetland area, filled with muddy marshes and little swamps, with thick undergrowth and low-hanging branches. You might think that a creature from Australia, which is well known for its blazing heat and its giant deserts and rainforests, might find it difficult to adapt to a place like this. But in actual fact, this habitat is very similar to where the red-necked wallabies would naturally live in the east of Australia. So it seems that they were able to make themselves at home very quickly. They've been mostly seen feeding on small low-hanging leaves, of which there is an abundance, including bracken and ivy, which might not be the type of food that they would eat in Australia, but it seems to be suiting them just fine. They also like to use their claws to scrape away bark from tree trunks and branches, and evidence of this can be seen in many places through the Kuras. But there are other factors that demonstrate why the wallabies have been able to get such a good grip. For one thing, they have no natural predators here. There are no foxes on this island, nor any badgers or snakes. The largest predators here are polecats, hawks, and feral cats, and none are big enough or inclined to take on an adult wallaby, and the young are well protected in the pouches of the females. They also have very limited competition here. The island's local wildlife also includes rabbits, hares, and countless small garden birds. But these are all interested in other foods like grass and seeds. None of them eat the same shrubs as the wallabies, which allow them to fill their own niche here. They are, effectively, this island's version of small deer, of which there are also none living wild here. And the only competition they may face can come from feral goats. But how do they survive the winter? Surely this place has got to be a lot colder than where they would live in Australia. How have they been living through the colder months where food would be much more scarce? Well, in actual fact, the climate here is generally milder than the surrounding islands of the United Kingdom. Sea currents generate a lot of mist around the island and create a lot of rain, leading to both generally cooler summers and milder winters. So the wallabies usually have little difficulty in getting by. That's not always the case though. This year, in late March, the Isle of Man was hit with the worst snowstorm it's seen in 50 years, making it the single worst case of snow the wild wallabies have ever experienced here. But they seem to have muddled through just fine. Even if the snow covers up all the leaves they eat, there's still never a shortage of tree bark. But there is another factor that could potentially impact on the wallabies' lives. Though the Kuras are fairly remote and are a protected site of special scientific interest, the wallabies can still easily cross paths with us, humans. There have been regular reports from locals of wallabies appearing in their gardens. And there are also a number of sheep farms in the Kuras areas. Local farmers see their tracks and droppings quite prominently on their land, and for some, hardly a day goes by where they don't see one, sitting in the denser thickets and watching them warily. And on rare occasions, they have even been encountered in the city.
It was a Friday evening, and it must have been about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Me and my colleague were in a police transit van, and we were coming out round here, out towards that corner just beyond, a couple of 100 yards up the road. And coming towards us in the road, we thought it was clearly a wallaby. I'd never ever seen a wallaby. I'd always wanted to see a wallaby. And here it was coming hopping towards us. Now, we used the police van and we also guided him. I got out of the police van And we guided him into Croshicks Lane, which is just up round the corner. And Croshicks Lane runs out to an old farm, but it also runs through the golf course. And he kept stopping and fronting us up, and he would be stamping his foot and stamping his foot. He just did not want to go. Eventually we did. We got him to go out there, and once we saw him setting off across the green, we just left him to it.
Despite this, human interaction with the wallabies is still kept to a minimum, and there is little threat from that direction as they are not considered a pest. But there is a far greater concern. Several wallabies have been spotted that are actually blind in one or both eyes. Why? The most likely answer is in their genes. With such a small number of wallabies starting this population, the gene pool that they all share is similarly small, and a large amount of inbreeding could be causing this pattern blindness. As of now, this doesn't seem to affect them too much, as even the blind ones can still get around by following the scent trails of the others. But it is possible that with continued inbreeding, this problem may escalate much further. To that end, the future of the wallabies here is uncertain. Perhaps they will continue to thrive and grow, or perhaps they will eventually die off as a result of increasing genetic disabilities. One thing is known: the wallabies are on their own. They're unlikely to receive any help from the humans, as they're not native species. They're invaders, and there are other local species here that demand more conservation attention. But for now and some time to come, it looks like the wallabies are here to stay. They are true opportunists, and a great example of why nature cannot always be given labels.